Welcome, trainers, to a journey down memory lane, where we play through each Pokemon generation and talk about our experiences, starting with Generation 1, the Kanto region. My name is Chris. I'm the normal trainer, and I'm playing Pokemon Blue. I'm also joined by my two fellow co-hosts.
My name is Sean. I am the Pokemon Master, and I am playing Pokemon Red.
And my name is Dustin. I'm playing Pokemon Yellow, and I'm also the trainer who thought Vulpix was an EV evolution.
We are known as the Trainer Trio.
In our last episode, we beat Erica and acquired the Rainbow Badge. Since then, we participated in a round-robin battle on Pokemon Showdown to see who really had the best Pokemon team.
I will now provide a little rundown of what happened at the round robin. Before I go into it, just to give everyone a rundown of where we were at, I was 6-0, Dustin was 2-4, and Chris was 1-5. And so, listeners, if you have a friend, now would be a great time to bet if you think I am still undefeated. Now we'll go into the actual matchups themselves. We first started off with a Chris versus Dustin match to see who will come out on top. And for this round, Dustin's Gyarados was really the MVP. Chris really had no answers against Dustin's Gyarados, so Dustin was able to come out on top and get that W over Chris. And then we went into the fight between me and Chris. So again, listeners, bet if I lost here. And if you did bet that I lost, well, then you lost some money because, of course, I beat Chris. His Sand Slash, as always, has been an issue for me because it's very fast and it gets the critical hits with the slash. And so that was difficult for me. But in the end, my Flareon, also known as Vulpix, as Dustin calls him, was able to come out on top. And then finally, probably the closest match was between me and Dustin. And this was a crazy match where it came down to eventually it was Dustin's Gyarados against my Flareon. And Dustin thought I was going to switch out my Flareon, so he decided to use an Ice Beam, but I just decided to stay in with Flareon. I used Body Slam that did get a paralysis off on the Gyarados, and so because of that, I was able to barely win. I was down to my last Pokemon of a Wartortle who had less than half health, so I was very, very close to taking my first L, but I did not, so now the records are I am 8-0, still undefeated. Dustin is now 3-5, and Chris is a measly 1-7. We will see if that changes in future episodes, but right now it goes to show that I am the Pokemon Master and Chris is just a normal trainer.
And just to comment about that too, usually we leave the best matches for last, so in this case we're thinking, alright, Chris against Sean, me against Sean, those are going to be weaker matches, and they have been extremely tight. And we left the last one, me versus Chris, last because we're like, we're at least doing even. And that ended up being the most lopsided match we've had since. So we'll have to see how it goes after this gym.
Let me just say, that battle really affected me deeply, and I changed up my team just to get revenge on you. Just saying.
So, no Gyarados sweeps this time?
Oh, there will not be any Gyarados sweeps, I promise.
Well, we'll have to see, because there's a lot that happened this episode and a lot of new Pokemon. But just to go over also some quick last episode recaps of just some statistics I gathered. I did notice that for the time it took us to complete the last gym, Chris had 2 hours and 37 minutes, Sean had 2 hours and 57, and I actually had the longest at 3 hours and 22 minutes, so a full hour difference of completing that gym with Chris. I also saw that Chris and I both caught 6 new Pokemon in the last gym, and Sean only caught 2 new Pokemon, so he's not really specializing in that Pokemon catching. And then the most interesting aspect here was the average level per party. Maybe because Chris, he only had 3 Pokemon. It was a lot higher at 31.7. Sean had the second highest at 28.7. And then for me, I had a 27.2 average party level. So I did have the lowest average party level there.
All right. Thank you, Dustin. To go over what we're going to cover in this episode, we're going to go to the game corner and then subsequently the rocket hideout. Then we're going to go to Lavender Town, go through the Pokemon Tower. From there, we'll be able to fight Snorlax and go through Cycling Road. And because this is such a large episode, we are going to pause there before even making it to Fuchsia City.
before we dive into the Rocket Game Corner, I just wanted to point out a few things since our last episode, since we last recorded. One of them being is that I did just realize in Gen 1 that Sean has the Flareon and I have the Vaporeon, and none of us actually had their type moves when they evolved. And I think in the new gens, when you evolve, you at least get like a water type or fire type move. So I thought that just made it a lot more difficult, at least in this gen, to get what you need.
Just speaking on that, since I had the Flareon, it was very strange that he doesn't learn Ember until 31, which Ember's a pretty weak move to wait all the way to get to level 31 to finally start using a stab fire type move. But I digress. Gen 1 is wonky, and we're just going to enjoy the process of playing through it.
Yeah, talking about Jolteon, last episode I determined I was not going to use Jolteon because I had in mind using an Electrode, just because I'm trying to go for a little bit of a speed team here. And then I completely changed my mind. I said, I'm going to use this Eevee, evolve it into a Jolteon, and we're going to turn him into a sweeper. So yes, I added... at the very beginning of this episode, I added Jolteon to my team. My Jolteon's name right now is Eve, like Eevee, so pretend it's still an Eevee. And looking at the learn set of Jolteon, it's also quite weak, like you mentioned, Sean. It learns Thunder Shock at level 31. And then it learns Thunder at 54. So that is the only two electric moves. But lucky for me, Lieutenant Surge gives you the TM for Thunderbolt, so I had that handy, never taught it to my Pikachu in the OG days, so my Jolteon knows Thunderbolt, thank you.
I just want to ask, Chris, did you decide to add that Jolteon because you got swept by Dustin's Gyarados in the last round robin?
That is a quite astute observation, Sean. Yes, that is the exact reason why I added it. I did not want to wait until whenever you catch Electrode to be able to add this. So good luck, Dustin. There's a quad weakness to electricity with Gyarados, so haha.
Oh boy, that is very fascinating. I'm looking forward to the battle afterwards. We'll see our parties afterwards too, if I kept that Gyarados in my party or not too, because maybe I was playing the mind games and thinking Chris might harbor a vengeance. Otherwise, moving on, I was just doing some quick online looking and realized like Golbat's name in French is Nosferatu, which is like basically a vampire name, which I thought was very fascinating. I don't know how I came across this. I was just looking at some Pokemon, their evolutions, and that really jumped out to me.
That's pretty funny.
Sean, I wrote this in the notes. Did you see Golbat's sprite in Generation 1 in Red and Blue?
I did. And so I think if I look through my notes, so the exact note I said was WTF is up with Golbat, because WTF is up with Golbat, yo. He looks weird.
Dustin, do you know what we're talking about at all?
I have no idea. I have not seen the Red and Blue sprite for Golbat.
Oh, the Golbat has its tongue sticking out. It is like, who designed this? Like, there are no other sprites in any other Pokemon games with it looking like that. Someone had too much fun with this.
Yeah, the eyes is what really threw me off. Like, the eyes are super weird, too. Just, I don't know what's up with him, yo.
That's my favorite Generation 1 sprite that I always think about, so I'm glad that we encountered it finally.
I am going to say the first thing I did after we cleared the Celadon City gym, obviously we mentioned a little bit about the game corner, about like if we wanted to gamble or whatnot last episode. I knew I wanted one game corner Pokemon specifically, but I wasn't going to gamble for it. But after the gym, I had enough money, so I went to the game corner and I got myself, like directly after the gym, I got myself a Dratini. You get it at level 18, which is a very, I think at this point in time, my Pokemon were all like level 28-ish, 27, 28. So it's a very low level Pokemon. And then also when I got him, I named him Shenron, if we have any Dragon Ball Z fans out there. And then also, rest in peace, Akira Toriyama, just cause that happened probably a week after I got my, Shenron. But yes, I got myself a Dratini, and just speaking a little bit on that, when I got my Dratini, because of every other Pokemon game, I'm so used to him just being absolutely useless until he evolves. But I'll go into this a little bit further as we continue the episode. Because of how OP Rap is in the first generation, he's actually quite useful as just the first evolution, which I'm just so used to him being trash. So it was a nice, refreshing thing to actually have use of Dratini.
Were you aware that Dratini is also available at the Safari Zone? And was that a decision to pick it up earlier, or was it you didn't realize that, so you just bought Dratini?
I mean, we're definitely going to get into the Safari Zone this episode, but I just knew catching it in the Safari Zone would be very difficult, and I didn't want to go through that process. And I also knew that red, the Dratini, is much more affordable than it would be in blue. So because it was a possibility that I could get it so early and not have to deal with trying to catch it in the Safari Zone, I decided, yep, I'm going to get it. Because there's also, of the Game Corner Pokemon, I wanted a Dratini, and then also I want a Scyther, and we will maybe get to that later. But those are the two Pokemon I kind of identified that I want to get at the Game Corner, or I think they're both available in the Safari Zone. So one way or another, I wanted them on my party.
I also did get one Pokemon from the Game Corner just because I haven't seen them yet, is Vulpix, the EV evolution.
Chris, your face looks a little weird there.
Yeah, because I was unaware that Vulpix is able to be bought, but looking at Pokemon Yellow, yes, Vulpix is available in Yellow, but not red or blue. Interesting.
Wow. Oh, continue, Dustin.
That was the cheapest Pokemon I could get. I know there's Cypher too, which looks very appetizing, but he was just too expensive for me. And Porygon, which is just insane. You have to have at least around, like, for me, 300,000 gold to, like, get him. And I've been spending a lot of money on Pokeballs.
So I'll cover what I did in the Game Corner. I think I mentioned probably last episode that there are coins that you can find on the ground that give you a little bit of a start. And I did gamble for a little bit. I was trying a couple strategies. At one point, I got lucky and I was able to slowly get up to like 400 or 500 coins, which I realized would not be enough for what I wanted. So I did this actually at the very end after reaching Koga, but I spent over 100,000 Pokedollars to buy coins, not to buy a Pokemon, but to buy TM15 Hyper Beam. And you guys will figure out which Pokemon I put that on.
Oh no, I'm scared.
I'm very scared about that.
The Rocket Hideout, I thought it was interesting. If you go around the town, there's a couple people who will mention that there is organized crime run by Team Rocket, that they're running the Game Corner, that there is a mysterious guy guarding a poster. So if you go up to him and talk to him, he will just get really startled. He will fight you. He only has a level 20 Raticate and a level 20 Zubat, so I'm sure you guys defeated him pretty handedly. And then we're able to go downstairs into the Rocket Hideout.
In the Rocket Hideout, did you guys have any issues clearing it out or anything of note happen when you were just trying to complete it?
So this is where you encounter a lot of Pokemon that use poison, and I don't think we mentioned it before, but in Gen 1, poison affects your Pokemon in between moves. So, like, you'll attack, and then you'll be affected, and then they'll attack. And I thought that was quite interesting, because you can circumvent it if you wipe out their Pokemon, then you don't even take poison damage at the end of the round.
As I mentioned earlier, I just added Dratini to my team, and so I will get into now how crazy Rap is. Going into the Rocket Hideout, since he's the lowest level, I started off with him for like every Pokemon or every trainer. So he starts off, his moveset is Rap, Agility, or I think he may have learned Agility a little bit later, but eventually he had Rap, Agility, and Thunder Wave. And so I realize how OP a strategy it is that if I noticed I had a trainer that had multiple Pokemon, I would just first start off using Agility to ensure my Dratini was faster than almost all of their Pokemon, and just use Rap until I ran out of the Pokemon moves. And I would go through, clear so many, I think like I would clear like 3 trainers, then go back up, heal my Dratini, go back down, and just do that. By the end, almost by the end of the Rocket Hideout, because like I said, I got him at 18. The rest of my Pokemon were like level 28, 27, around that range. And so near the end of the Rocket Hideout, I think I got him all the way up to like 24 just by clearing out all of those trainers.
I can't say I had too much trouble with many of these Pokemon. Machop definitely got really annoying on me because I have a normal type Persian. So when it used low kick, it was quite frustrating. Although Karate Chop It's a high critical hit move, so that's annoying, but it's a normal type move in Gen 1, not a fighting type move, so not being weak to that was really helpful. And also, Drowsy was giving me a lot of trouble at this point because Drowsy has a great special stat, and we've covered this before, that just psychic types are OP in Gen 1. There's so little to deal with them that every time I encounter a psychic type, I'm just dreading it.
And moving a bit further into the Rocket Hideout, there was also a puzzle inside, which I guess it's been a while since I played Generation 1, but you definitely encounter this in a couple gyms in further generations, where in this puzzle, you'll step on one of the squares and it'll just send your character flying until it hits something. And in this case, I finished the puzzle and got to the other side where there's an elevator and tried to get inside the elevator and realized you need to get a key. So that frustrated me a little bit because that means I just went through the whole puzzle and then I had to do it another time and I did not memorize how to complete it.
Generation 1 definitely has the most frustrating version of this puzzle because it's just so slow. In the later generations, they speed it up. It's not quite as agonizing, but and if you mess up, just doing it again, I think that we're seeing some of the clunkiness of Generation 1 in this area for sure.
When we did the Lieutenant Surge gym, that puzzle is my most hated puzzle of all time. But then this is probably my second most hated one, just because of what Chris said, how slow it is to move from one spot to another when you step on the actual square. And that's very frustrating.
Also, some good items that you can get in the Rocket Hideout. You can get Ep.5 up. That was hidden, so I don't know if you guys were able to get that one. There's a hyper potion. There is an escape rope, so in case you guys want to escape out of there. There's another moonstone for some reason. There is a super potion for some reason. TM07 horn drill. There is a revive, a nugget, which is also hidden. So a lot of hidden stuff there. And then also another rare candy. Oh, and I missed one. TM02 razor wind, which brings up the point of there are so many moves in Gen 1 that have kind of like the solar beam type of thing where you need to charge and then it hits. Like razor wind, you have skull bash. And those moves are always so terrible, and I don't understand why Gen 1 really tried to hype them up. So I'm going to assume none of you guys thought your Pokemon Razor Wind.
No.
Nope.
Because then also, isn't Razor Wind a normal move too?
Yes, exactly. And I actually had a note on that. It said TM02 Razor Wind sucks. Never use Razor Wind.
So I think at this point, we've all reached to seeing who the big bad of Team Rocket is, being Giovanni. When you talk to him, and I guess I'm just so used to the new Pokemon games, I was expecting a huge monologue, him to go off about what his plans are, blah, blah, blah. But I think he only had 2 or 3 lines of dialogue, and then you go straight into the battle. I'm like, whoa, that's a little unexpected. I was expecting to find out all the inner workings of Team Rocket, because that's how the new games are. Did you guys have any issues with the Giovanni boss fight?
Before I even reached Giovanni, in Pokemon Yellow, you do get ambushed by Jesse and James again. And in this case, they wanted revenge for me defeating them in Mount Moon and taking the fossil. But obviously, they were no match for me. In this case, they had Coughing, Meowth, and Ekans. And after their defeat, they do make a pun. Team Rocket is blasting off again, and then they run off.
I wonder where I've heard that before.
Oh, that's from the anime.
Been a while since I've listened to the anime. Otherwise, encountering Giovanni, in this case, in previous episodes, I always had a challenge with the Onix and Rock-type Pokemon. For me, he had the Onix, Rhyhorn, and Persian, and because I did have Gyarados, I went through it very quickly, which was nice.
Sean, you specifically said, did anyone have an issue with Giovanni? And I did have an issue. We need to stop Italian stereotypes of being mafia bosses.
But Chris, aren't you a mafia boss?
Just because my father owns an Italian restaurant, and we may have a basement that has a mafia boss underneath.
It's not even a stereotype. It's just the truth at this point, is it not?
That was a note I wrote, was like, wow, nice for using an Italian as the big bad guy in Generation 1. But in terms of the actual Pokemon, in Red and Blue, he has a level 25 Onix, and a level 24 Rhyhorn, and a level 29 Kangaskhan, and my Sandslash was able to take down Onix and Rhyhorn one shot with Dig. Kangaskhan, My Pokemon were already in the 30s. It's a normal type Pokemon. It wasn't too difficult for me. So Giovanni was unfortunately a little underwhelming.
I didn't really write notes on that fight because it was like what Chris said, kind of underwhelming for me too. As I noted, I started every fight leading with Dratini, but then as Chris said, he started off with an Onix, and I was like, damn, I can't do my wrap strategy because there's no way it's going to do any damage to him. So I believe I was just, because I wanted to make sure that my Dratini got the XP, I was just switching in between him and my Wartortle at the time. I think Wartortle like one-shot the Rhyhorn and the Onix. I did note that the sprite for Rhyhorn looks a little weird. I don't know. It wasn't egregious. It wasn't like crazy weird, but just weird enough that I had to note it. But anyways, continuing on, my Wartortle just did all the damage. And then when he did have the Kangaskhan, I went back to my wrap strategy.
I'm looking up the sprite right now for Rhyhorn, but I had a note in the game corner that said, Arbok's sprite looks really cool, tell Sean, because you have on so many sprites that I thought I found one that was kind of cool. So I like Arbok.
I did note that Arbok's sprite looks amazing. I think it's a one sprite that like I've encountered that looked amazing. Super love it. And so it's so funny that you note that too. The final note I wanted to say on the Giovanni boss battle, he ends it saying, I hope we meet again, which is super nice for who's supposed to be the big bad. I'm just like, you really hope we meet again? Like, I just thwarted your plans. What?
The only other note I have is that I looked up in yellow for Dustin that he has a Persian. I like that because obviously yellow is a little bit more anime focused, and there's many times you see Giovanni petting his cat Persian, which I don't know if that's Italian stereotype or it's supposed to be like in James Bond, how Blofeld has his little cat. But I like that they added the Persian to Giovanni to not only just give him more than a rock ground type Pokemon, but that little tie into the anime. I liked that.
It did make it easier for me to beat him with the Persian.
Don't diss any Persians because my Purdy is doing pretty good. Before we're done with the game corner, I was actually kind of surprised. I put down a note here that said you need to talk to the rocket grunt that drops the lift key to get it, which in the later generations, you don't do that. I think it automatically appears. And I thought that maybe would have stumped you guys that you have to talk to him after you beat him to get it. But it sounds like none of you guys got stumped.
In this case, when I talked to him, I did actually take the note because in the very beginning, he does say or mentions that the elevator is locked and it needs a lift key. And he was wondering, oh, who has it? So afterwards, I was like, all right, maybe if I talk to him again, maybe he'll tell me who has it. And he just immediately gives it to you.
I definitely did note that too, because I think from in the Fire Red, he just drops it after you beat him. And so I only knew that he's the one who had the lift key from my prior playthroughs of Fire Red. So after I beat him, I'm like, what's happening? Why didn't he drop the item? I was wondering if that may have, first time Pokemon playthroughs, how many people got stumped at that point in time.
Right? There's so many things in the game that if you talk to NPCs, they'll give you hints on what to do. Even one of the rocket grunts mentions that you need the Sylph Scope to see ghosts in the Pokemon Tower. They start mentioning that. But in this case, you're right. No one mentions you have to talk to this guy again to get the lift key. If you've beaten every trainer and searched every corner, why would you ever guess you need to talk to everyone again to get a crucial item in the game? That's ridiculous. From there, once you have the Sylph Scope, you can go back to Lavender Town and take on the Pokemon Tower. Dustin already went there previously and got stopped by a ghost. So this item's going to help you identify that ghost. But this was my first time going into the Pokemon Tower. I didn't go in last episode. And my little note that I wrote was that this Pokemon Tower is so sad. Every single NPC is there to mourn a lost Pokemon. And I thought for sure that was something they would never attempt these days, to like put into a child's game an area where like their beloved Pokemon are just dead. I just thought that was really interesting. And the theming is really cool. So I'm really glad that something like the Pokemon Tower exists in the older games.
It's just crazy how it's not just people going there from Lavender Town to mourn their Pokemon, but they do mention like some of them came from other towns. So it sounds like this is literally the Kanto grave site.
Dustin, did you fight your rival? I think you mentioned you fought the rival in the Pokemon Tower last episode, right?
I did. So I did not encounter him in this episode.
Well, then I guess I'll just open it to Chris then. Did you have any difficulties with the rival fight in the Pokemon Tower?
I did not. I wrote a note that my rival, Poo-Poo, was a bit of a pushover. My rival had a Pidgeotto, which I took down very easily with my new Jolteon, my new Eevee. However, it looks like Blue has added someone to his team. In this case, he had a Growlithe, level 23. That also was not too difficult. He had an Execute, level 22, which my Charmeleon was able to take down. Kadabra, level 20, which if anyone knows anything about the Abra Kadabra line, their physical defense is horrible. So Purdy was able to body slam it to death. And then Wartortle, level 25, it gave me a little bit of trouble. But as I mentioned, at this point, my Pokemon were in the 30s. And if the best he's got is a level 25, I'm doing pretty good.
I took notes on the fight, but it really was uneventful. There wasn't much that happened. Again, I just kind of left my Dratini, used Wrap until I had to switch out to my Wartortle to clean up against his Growlithe and Kadabra. And then I went to my Flareon just to beat his Ivysaur. Also, I want to note that obviously last episode, Dustin believed that Vulpix was the evolution of Eevee. And so because of that, is during this rival fight that I remembered, oh wait, I want to rename my Flareon to Vulpix. And so I went after this rival fight because, you know, the name raider is in Lavender Town. So I went there and then renamed my Flareon from Flare to Vulpix. And it does trip me up a little bit when I look at it. I'm like, I didn't catch a Vulpix. I'm like, wait a second. It's a joke. That's why I named it. So that's what I did.
And looking at the rival fight here in Red and Blue, I definitely have the easiest team to go against that I chose Charmander because I mentioned he has an Execute if you have Charmander. And it only knows Barrage and Hypnosis, so it's pretty easy to take down. It looks like, Sean, you had to go up against a Gyarados that knew Hydro Pump. That wasn't difficult at all?
So he led with his Pidgeotto. And so, like I said, I did my agility and then wrap strategy with Dratini. He brought out Gyarados, which I did note that Gyarados' sprite also looks good. The specific note I said was Gyarados perfect since Gen 1. I was fine because of how OP Wrap is. And since the agility got my Dratini faster than his Gyarados, that I just wrapped it to death.
I think in the last episode we might mention it, but just to recap too, in Lavender City, there's quite a few people mentioning that, hey, there's this Cubone who their mother passed away, the Marowak. So just want to mention that before we start heading up further into this Pokemon Tower. Did you guys capture any new Pokemon in the Pokemon Tower?
So I, notorious for not catching new Pokemon. I actually did catch a couple Pokemon. I know I did get the Cubone encounter, and I know it's kind of a rarer encounter in the Pokemon Tower, so I caught it. I named it Mother, and then I put it in the PC because I don't think I'm going to be adding it to my party at all. But then I also, shortly after that, I had a Haunter encounter, and so I just decided might as well catch it. Didn't really plan on using it much, but I named it Spook, and I threw it in the PC.
How about you, Chris?
I'm looking through my Pokedex now. I caught Ghastly, I caught Haunter, and I caught Cubone. Those are the only 3 Pokemon that were available to me. I caught all 3 of them, and I put a little note about Ghastly because we keep talking about sprites that I said, at first, I did not like the way that Ghastly looks in Red and Blue because, just for your reference, Dustin, it almost looks like little gas particles put together with a face. Unlike what we know today of the Ghastly you saw in Pokemon Yellow, where it was like a black ball. At first I said, oh, I don't like this. And then I read its Pokedex entry that said, almost invisible, this gaseous Pokemon cloaks the target and puts it to sleep without notice. And I was like, well, it's the gas Pokemon, and it mentions it's gaseous. So I'm like, I actually don't mind its design. Maybe that's kind of how it's supposed to look. It's almost just like an actual gas instead of a ball of something.
Ghastly, what we know Ghastly looks like now, it kind of looks like a black hole in a way, because it's literally just like a black sphere with like purple gas around it.
I noted Ghastly looks gassy. That's what I said.
Talking about Ghastly too, I did notice when I was fighting against Ghastlies, I used Dig, ground type move. Apparently it's super effective against Ghastly, which I thought was interesting. I don't know if ground type move is actually super effective in other generations against Ghost type.
Well, so it's super effective because Ghastly is also a poison type. And so ground is super effective against poison. But in other generations, Ghastly and Haunter and even Gengar, they have the ability Levitate. So they're not affected by ground moves. So it's something that you probably won't know from other games. But because there are no abilities in Gen 1, you could hit ground type moves against a Ghastly.
That's right. And that's just one thing I didn't like about this area was that there were so many trainers, little channelers, and they all had the same Pokemon, and it made it so repetitive and redundant that I wasn't having too much fun going through there, except maybe reading a little bit of the dialogue, like one of the channelers that just said, "Blood, what is happening here?"
When you look further into the dialogue too, there's kind of like a theme going on where it looks like all the channelers are actually possessed by Ghastly. Because afterwards, when you talk to some of them after you beat them, they make nonsense comments like blood or like, ah. And then after you beat them, they're like, I'm saved, thank God. Have you guys noticed that?
I did not notice that. That's interesting.
I didn't pay attention enough to that, so I'm glad you did.
Before we keep moving on, I did capture also the 3 Pokemon Chris captured. And I did write down for Haunter from his Pokédex, a lick from Haunter will cause shaking that won't stop until your demise, which is also quite frightening. You do not want to get licked by a Haunter, otherwise they'll be shaking for the rest of your life. So definitely avoid Haunters in the real world. And then one more Pokédex entry from Cubone, which is also probably one of the most morbid ones, where Cubone wears the skull of its dead mother. So every time you see a Cubone, its mother has passed away. In this case, immediately after I caught Cubone, I did realize that there's a trade that you can do way back in Route 5. So this is my first case where after I caught Cubone, I did actually use Fly to go to Route 5, or like the town nearby Route 5. And this was my first time using Fly on my Pidgeotto. And when you use it, you turn into the Pokemon and you start flying away, which it's very weird nowadays because in the most modern generations, you usually hop on the Pokemon, you don't turn into them. I also use Fly to get that item finder, which you need 30 Pokemon in your Pokédex. So I definitely wanted to get that. Just to end real quick on that one trade, you guys will find out at the end of this episode, what did I trade it?
One final note that I had for the Pokemon Tower was that it was quite difficult for me, not in just like the battles being hard, but because every Pokemon is a ghost type and most of my Pokemon moves are all normal, it was just kind of hard for me to clear out. At this point in time, too, I was obviously still trying to train my Dratini to get it to a level of the rest of my party, and all I knew was Rat, and that doesn't affect any ghost type. So I'd start off every battle with my Dratini and switch into another Pokemon, and I think I only had my Wartortle and my Flareon that had, I don't think it actually knew Ember at this point, but I think I only had like 2 Pokemon that could actually damage the ghost types because everyone else was just reliant on normal type moves, and so it was just quite time consuming going through that Oki Tower.
Talking about the annoying ghost moves, there was one of them also, Confuse Ray. This was the first time I encountered Confuse Ray, which I just hate it when my Pokemon are confused. There's a time when my OG Pokemon Gyarados was knocked out by itself just because of Confuse. I was so frustrated.
Dustin, do you know how confusion kind of works in all the Pokemon generations or no?
I do not know.
It basically makes it so you're attacking yourself with a typeless, I think 40 power base move. And in the case of Gyarados, if you have a very high attack stat and kind of a lower defense stat, it's going to be that more devastating than if you have a Pokemon with a low attack stat.
So I was definitely hindered by that. My Gyarados kept fainting.
And you'll see when you reach Generation 3, like the move Swagger, where it gives you an attack buff but makes you confused. That's part of the strategy is you raise your attack, and then if you hit yourself, it really hurts. But we'll cover that in Gen 3. The only other notes I had on the Pokemon Tower is that it had some pretty good items. You could get an elixir, you can get another nugget, which came in clutch. Told you I needed to buy a TM for Hyper Beam. You could get a rare candy, and you could get an X accuracy. And I'm going to break a little secret to you guys that X accuracies are broken in Generation 1. If you give it to a Pokemon in a battle, it basically bypasses the accuracy check for its moves. So those moves like Fire Blast or Thunder that have low accuracy, they become 100% accurate moves. It's very broken, and I will not be doing that because I don't want to break the game, but just letting you guys know that little strategy in Gen 1.
That's very nice of you, Chris, not wanting to break the game after doing a glitch to capture a Mew.
A level 100 Mew? No, that's not broken at all.
At the second gym, too.
Oh, yeah, and I guess we didn't really talk about the main encounter in the Pokemon Tower. The ghost turns out to be Marowak. the ghost of Cubone's dead mother. If you try and catch this Marowak, your Pokeball will not work. So you cannot catch it. You can only defeat it. And also, fun enough, there's a little glitch in the game where if you use a Pokédoll to flee from this battle, the game will consider it defeated, allowing access to the 7th floor, which means that technically speaking, you can get past this area of the game before you even beat the game corner. So little ways to get around in Gen 1.
Once when you do get to the top level, in yellow, I already beat Jesse and James, but they pop up again. So that's twice now in one full gym route that we've been doing. This case, they did evolve their Pokemon. So they still had the Meowth. They also have an Arbok and a Weezing. And they're still very easy for me to beat, putting up no match. I wonder why they keep challenging me.
I was a little confused going through this. I always kind of remembered that we had to do this area because Mr. Fuji was kidnapped and he was at the top of the tower. And then you speak to him and he says, "Oh, I'm just up here praying." And then I wondered, why is Team Rocket here also? Were they trying to get the Poke Flute? Were you guys able to pick up on this?
I believe the reason Jesse and James were there was, I think they were trying to capture the Marowak spirit, I want to say, but I did not write down those specific notes.
Sean, do you have any other insight on anything?
The only assumption I can make is that they wanted the Poke Flute to catch whatever that sleeping Pokemon is. Because there's no other reason, not unless they were there mourning their dead Pokemon, which I don't think is a possibility, but who knows, you know?
I couldn't figure out why that was happening, so oh well.
After this point, you do talk to Mr. Fuji, and afterwards, it was kind of jarring because he immediately teleports you back home. And at least in this point of the story for me, I still didn't capture like all the Pokemon I wanted to capture. So I had to immediately go back to the Poke Tower. So I thought that was a bit frustrating instead of just allowing you to go back to his home. He does give you the Poke Flute. At this point, I was like, all right, time to like continue walking on. And this is when I entered Saffron City. And I was like, uh-oh. I need to text you guys to see what was the proper route again, because I wasn't sure if I should just take on the Saffron City Gym or if we're actually sticking to going to Fuchsia City.
I was going to ask, because now that we have the Poke Flute, we had two options of two sleeping Pokemon that we could have decided to wake up. I will just start off with asking Chris, which sleeping Pokemon did you decide to wake up? The one by the cycling route or I'm just calling it the water route because I don't remember it off the top of my head, but the water route or the cycling route, which sleeping Pokemon did you wake up?
I did what I thought was the natural progression, which was just go south from Lavender Town to Route 12 and fight the Snorlax right there. But it seems like my co-host, for some reason, decided to go back across town and not do that.
In my case, instead of going down, I just went straight through Saffron City and then just kept going.
So I also went to the cycling route. And so my thought process is, so at this time, I thought I was going to use Haunter for the gym. So I added it to my party. I thought the cycling route had less trainers than the longer water route. And I knew I wanted to catch a Pokemon in the Safari Zone was when we got to Fuchsia City. And I wanted that opportunity to get those levels from those trainers with that Pokemon. So that's why I went the cycling route and I used my Haunter. And so now, did everyone catch the sleeping Pokemon that woke up? Well, actually, before I get in that, what was the sleeping Pokemon that woke up? What was his name, Chris?
I believe that Pokemon was Snorlax.
A+. I did want to read his Pokédex because, of course, I had to capture a new Pokemon, which was Snorlax. And his Pokédex mentions he will eat anything, even if it is a little moldy. Never gets an upset stomach. So that would be quite a nice ability to have.
Talking about my fight with Snorlax, it was actually a lot more difficult than I thought it was going to be. Like, I went up against it and I said, oh, I should be able to catch this. No problem at all. And then I kept killing it or something. I could not catch it. I'd run out of Pokeballs. I was so confused. I did not remember it being this difficult. So I actually had to reset my game 2 or 3 times. And then, as you guys probably know, it can use rest and go back to sleep. So quite a frustrating fight. But after 3 or 4 attempts, I did end up catching Snorlax.
Wow, you're treating this like a legendary encounter.
Yeah, you had another encounter with Snorlax. It didn't have to be the first time to catch it.
Good point, but I did.
For me, so Haunter was not affected by any of Snorlax's moves, which also I found interesting is that it had Nightshade, which, is a ghost type move. And in the newer generations, Nightshade wouldn't affect a normal type Pokemon. But in this generation, Nightshade did affect Snorlax. So I used Nightshade to get it down. And then it also knew Hypnosis. So I used Hypnosis and I did catch it. I definitely gave him a nickname. I don't remember what, and I just sent him to the PC because I wasn't intending on adding him to my party. Did any of you two add the Snorlax to your party?
When I originally caught Snorlax, I did, just because it was, I believe, level 30, which was really high up there, and you don't really have to train him up to be a part of your party, but I don't know how long I kept him. I definitely trained him out later on.
I already had my normal type Pokemon. I have Persian, I have Purdy, so I did not add Snorlax to my team. Also because I believe Snorlax has a very low experience growth. It takes a lot of experience points to level it up. It just wasn't something I wanted to invest my time in. Now that we've talked about encountering the Snorlax, it sounds like you guys went down the bike path first. Did you guys find anything interesting about the bike path?
Oh, I did find something interesting, which is known as Cycling Road. So, you're going on this road with your bicycle, and you're kind of expecting, like, hey, there's going to be some other cyclists out here. And the first trainer you pop up is on, like, a Harley bike, and he's this middle-aged man. Turns out there's a lot of, like, biker gangs on the cycling road that just really want to gang up on you as this little kid trying to learn the world of Pokemon. This is where you encounter the biker trainer, and you also encounter a cue ball trainer, which looks even scarier than the normal biker trainer because he's this big bald guy in like bike armor. He also contains a whip. So I believe outside of this encounter, I think usually the people that have the whips are usually the Rocket team. So this, I think, was the first time outside of Team Rocket where you encounter a trainer with a whip. And the first encounter, he says that you have a nice bicycle. I want it. This is a scary portion of the Pokemon world is what I was thinking.
Did you also notice that the cue ball trainer had like a cup or something near his crotch, and I don't know what that was?
I did not notice that.
No? Sean?
I did not notice that, but it seems like you took specific notes about the crotch area of this trainer sprite.
Okay, when the episode is done, I will send you guys a picture, and next episode, we will be back to talk about this crotch. Carry on.
We need 30 minutes specifically to the crotch section of this trainer.
Well, I know another trainer that you beat. He basically says that there is no money in fighting kids after you beat him. Usually in this Pokemon world, you battle against other trainers to earn money if you beat them. So I'm thinking you usually never want to battle against a kid because how much money can they really have? Especially if you're a grown adult, these guys are just big up the kids.
My notes for the cycling road was that I thought I was going to use Haunter in the Fuchsia City gym. So I was using Haunter at this point, and he really was the MVP of this route because all the trainers use poison type Pokemon, which Haunter, being a ghost and poison type, has a quad resistance to all their poison attacks. And he also can't get poisoned. So he was just sweeping every trainer left and right. I don't think by the time I finished this route, I think I did evolve my Dratini to a Dragonair. And I had Haunter. All my Pokemon finally reached the same level again, which is big for me. One other thing I noticed, so I said how Nightshade could hit normal types being a ghost type move. I also noticed, I think one of the trainers on this route, they had Pokemon that knew Sonic Boom. And Sonic Boom, for you guys who don't know, it's a normal type attack that always does 20 damage. So it's a normal type attack that always does 20 damage. And this did hit my Haunter, even though it's a normal type move, which I just thought was interesting.
That definitely is only Generation 1 stuff. I don't think we're going to be encountering that later. So, yay, more Gen 1 jank.
Also in this route, I did capture a few new Pokemon other than Snorlax. I did capture the Pharaoh, which I believe you guys might already have since you have the Sparrow, but I never took Sparrow into my party to evolve it. And in this case, the Pokédex mentioned that Pharaoh is a Pokemon that dates back many years. You don't know how many years, but you do know it's an older Pokemon. And I also caught a Ponyta.
I was looking at the available Pokemon, and of course, Ponyta is a yellow exclusive. So thanks for rubbing it in our face, Dustin.
Ponyta I did add to my party for a little while, just because that was also another fire-type Pokemon, other than Vulpix I had. But I do not believe I kept them just because I found other Pokemon I was more interested in later.
I caught a Doduo in this route just because I realized I didn't have one. And we mentioned we already got HM02 Fly earlier, which turns out Doduo can learn Fly, even though it has no wings and is known as a flightless bird Pokemon. So I don't know. I don't get it, but that's my flyer now.
I did not catch any Pokemon at this point in time. I just swept the trainers and went down to Fuchsia City.
There's one other note that I took on the cycling road. Let me pull that real quick. There were quite a few signs that you notice on the way down cycling road, and one of them just caught my eye. It's actually pretty funny. It mentioned, "Don't throw the game, throw Pokeballs instead."
I read that as well. That was funny.
In this case, I think it would apply very well to Chris after restarting the game multiple times just to capture the Snorlax.
Did you read the sign that says, "Look out for dropped items"?
You know, I did, but I'm not going to find any invisible items this game, Chris. I apologize.
You have the item finder, Dustin. Have you used it yet?
I used it once, didn't find anything, and I was like, this is too much effort then, sort of. I don't need hidden items.
Sean, save me. Did you use the item finder and find any hidden items on the cycling road?
Well, if you remember, the item finder, you need 30 Pokemon. So I couldn't get an item finder. But going a little ahead, there was a time where I was grinding in the cycling road to prepare for the gym. At that point in time, I was just kept on pressing A going through the grass patch, and I found a rare candy there. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. But completely by accident.
Yes, there's some very good items on Cycling Road. There is a rare candy, a full restore, a max revive, a PP up, and a max elixir. Some of the best items in the game can be found if you just look around. But you guys can come back and get it later, I guess.
I definitely will.
All right, so now that we're done talking about Cycling Road, before we head into our next route, and then also before heading into Fuchsia City, we're going to end this episode here as a part 1, and we're going to be talking about Koga, and we'll also be doing our Pokemon Showdowns after part 2, so you could look forward to seeing who has the best Pokemon team there from this gym, and that's also where we're going to be labeling our stats after Koga. So until next time, we are the Trainer Trio signing off. Catch you in Fuchsia City finally.